What's happening, folks? Back with another reaction, back with some more video game music, and we're going to listen to a tune from the very first Castlevania, and I'm doing this because I'd like to do a playthrough of it. Unlike Castlevania 2, which takes hours of gameplay, even if you try to do it all in one sitting, I think it'd take at least a couple hours or more. I did it in like 5 or 6 playthroughs, partly because I didn't remember everywhere you had to go, and also because some of the castles are a bit difficult to figure out where you can find the items you need and so on. Castlevania the original, which I think came out a couple years earlier, I think it was like 87, it's a bit more of a traditional platformer, meaning you travel in one direction. I think it's mostly left to right, though I do think there's some levels where you go right to left. But yeah, you just try to defeat monsters or get by them, and then you fight boss monsters at the ends of levels, culminating in a fight with Dracula at the end of the game. But yes, it's not the same as Castlevania 2 Simon's Quest, where it's a bit more like an action game mixed with a role-playing game where you have to build up your weapons and get more items and talk to people in villages. It's not like that. It's a simple, I would say like hack and slash, but you use a whip, so it's a, whip and attack type of game. Whip, jump, and attack, because definitely there's some platform jumping involved. But yes, as I said, I'd like to do a playthrough of it, so I think I'm going to do it after I shoot this. It may not be up today, because sometimes I have to, always I have to process my microphone audio with the recorded video, like screen capture of the game, and that can take time, especially if the playthrough's longer. Now, because it's a sort of play it in one shot type of game, I will probably do it all in one video, but depending on how many times I die and so on, it might take longer. If I'm recalling correctly, excuse me, you get unlimited continues. You can keep trying again, even if there's parts that are giving you a lot of trouble. So that's the plan. Anyway, we're going to listen to a track called Vampire Killer, which is the very first level, like the first stage, first level, first part of the game soundtrack music. Now, again, I think you hear something else first, like in the menu, but once you start the game, this is the very first track you play, and as such, it has the most, nostalgic quality for me in relation to the first game, even though I don't think it's the best tune. I reacted to 2 other tracks from this soundtrack, Walking on the Edge and Wicked Child, both of which are fantastic, awesome tunes, and I think technically, or to my ears and brain, better than this one, but this one is the most nostalgic, and I think the one that is most immediately associated with this game, because again, right at the start it hits you with it, and it is a very good tune. It's got the action sound, but it also has a bit of mystery and a bit of danger, which obviously if you were to walk into Dracula's world and try to storm his castle and defeat him, there's definitely going to be some danger involved. So I think it hits all of that. It's the 2 composers, I think, are the same as the ones listed for Wicked Child, and also who were involved in Walking on the Edge, although I think that one was the Konami Kuke Club or something like that is the name they went under. But it's, make sure I have this right, it's Yamashita Kinuyo and Terashima Satoe. So yeah, Yamashita Kinuyo and Terashima Satoe, and the track is called Vampire Killer, and it's basically the opening tune from the very original Castlevania game for the Nintendo, though I do think the arcade game in Japan came first, and then, as I said, they ported it and I think redesigned it for the Nintendo release. But here we go, Vampire Killer from the original Castlevania. that was always the way. I didn't remember with this particular file, but that was always the way. Like, again, video game soundtracks here in the US, they were a more recent phenomenon. Now, I do think by the time you get to the 2000s, there were some, like, soundtracks that, you know, people were already interested in retro games, even though, like, then it was, you know, only, quote-unquote, like, 10, 15, 17 years in the past. Whereas, you know, these days, we're talking about games that are, like, almost 40 years old. But, yes, when they did start to release some music that you could find online for old school like Nintendo games and Sega Master System games, they usually would be 2 loops of the track, because again, old school video game tunes, they were like loops. They, like, right when it got to the last bar of the loop, it would just start over anew, because, you know, you played the level for an indefinite amount of time and it would just keep playing the track. You know, some loops are longer, some loops are a bit shorter. This one is pretty short, fair to say, maybe like 30 seconds or so. But yeah, it would usually do 2 loops and then begin to fade, and that's what we get here. So, as I said, it's nostalgic to me, even though I actually never owned the original Castlevania. I rented it because I had Castlevania 2. That's the first game in the franchise I ever played, Simon's Quest, which is why I did that first for my playthroughs, my video game playthroughs, when it comes to games in this franchise. But I did rent and play the first one. Now, I didn't beat it back in the day. However, I'd say 6, 7 years ago, whenever the mini systems, which if you didn't know, like, I don't know, about like a decade or so ago, maybe a little bit less than that, I forget what company. I mean, I assume the original companies, Sega, Nintendo, and so on, were involved, but they released mini systems which have like 50 or so games from the console in question. So I have a mini NES, a mini Super Nintendo, and a mini Genesis out in my living room. Now, since I do like YouTube gaming playthroughs with emulators and ROMs, I don't play them as much as I did about 6, 7 years ago, but when I got the NES Mini, I beat the original Castlevania. So I have beaten it, but I didn't beat it back in the day, and I actually didn't own it back in the day. So as I said, Castlevania 2 is the one that for me is the most nostalgic, even though that one was very frustrating when I tried to play it as a kid because I could never figure out what to do, and it was pre-internet days. You couldn't just look it up online. You had to try to figure it out, or, you know, maybe word of mouth from your friends who played games, or if you got Nintendo Power, which is like a magazine where it would talk about games, ones that were already out, but also they would like preview new games. But yeah, maybe there'd be something in there that'd give you a hint or a map or something. But the point is, I never had Castlevania 1, and I didn't beat it as a kid, but I have beaten it now. So, as I said, when I finish shooting these videos, I'm going to give it a go. We'll see what happens. As I said also, it may not be up today because it might take too long to process before I have to go to sleep. But I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully you are too. Let me know what you think of the tune, and I will see you next time. Peace.